The sound of scissors cutting paper and the excited chatter of children's voices were like a discordant orchestra to 9-year-old Luna in the small school studio. The vibrant colors of the drawings on the walls seemed to scream in her mind, and the sound of brushes scraping against the canvas amplified painfully. She sat alone on the floor, her arms pressed tightly against her chest, murmuring softly, "The rocket goes to the moon." Without a sound, the star shines. It was her way of navigating, of creating order in the chaos that surrounded her, of anchoring herself. Suddenly, a tall, distorted shadow loomed over her. It was Sophia, the leader of the clique in her class, and her friends, with cruel smiles on their faces. Sophia wasn't laughing. She was holding a stuffed animal, a disfigured alien, and pointing at Luna with a sneer that didn't reach her eyes. Look at Luna, talking to her imaginary friend, the crazy star child. Does she hear voices in her head? Or does she only understand the language of aliens? Sophia's friends laughed in unison, and one of them, Bia, pulled Luna's stool out from under her, causing her to lose her balance and fall to the floor. "We don't even know if she's real or if she's a broken robot." Luna cringed, her eyes wide with panic, the humiliation burning her cheeks. The rocket that took her to her safe world was under attack. "What do you mean?" They mocked her for the way she communicated, but little did they know that her mother would reveal a truth that would silence them all and turn their world upside down. In Luna's bedroom, a refuge of soft colors and few objects, the sound of the child's constant rocking was the only melody that broke the silence. Laura, Luna's mother, felt her heart tighten with each "rocket goes to the moon," murmured by her daughter, a melody that once brought relief, but now sounded like a lament. She vented to her friend and co-worker Gabriel on the phone, her voice choked with physical and mental exhaustion and an indignation that corroded her like strong acid. "Gabby, I can't take it anymore. Today at school, they made fun of Luna in a way you can't imagine. Sophia and her friends called my daughter Crazy Star, broken robot. They make fun of her for talking to herself, for being who she is. My heart is in pieces. I feel like I'm bleeding inside. I feel like trash, Gabby. Trash for not being able to protect her from such cruelty." The last few years had been a constant and exhausting battlefield for Laura. Since Luna was diagnosed with autism, their world had been turned upside down, transformed into unpredictable chaos. Luna's father, Felipe, had disappeared, evaporated, unable to cope with the reality of having an atypical daughter. Laura's family, well-meaning but ignorant about autism, kept telling her to accept her fate and pray more, as if it were a matter of faith, not neurodiversity. Prejudice was a constant shadow, hanging over them wherever they went. At the playground, mothers pulled their children away with looks of disgust and fear. In restaurants, judgmental stares followed her when Luna had a sensory overload, as if she were a spectacle to be avoided. "She's withdrawing, Gabby. She's isolating herself from everything and everyone again, closing herself off in her own world. The therapists say that the school environment is crucial for her development, for her social interaction. But how? How can she thrive in a place where she is being mocked for the way she exists, for her very essence? I see her clutching her little doll, the guiding star, and I know she is trying to protect herself from something that hurts her deeply, from something that scares her. That laughter, Gabby, it breaks my heart. It haunts me. I always told her that school was a safe place, a place of learning, of friendship. I blame myself, Gabby. I blame myself for not finding out sooner, for not being strong enough to get the truth out of them. I'm afraid of what the truth will reveal if I continue investigating, if I continue digging in this hole, but I need to know. I need to fight for her, whatever the cost." Laura cried, but in her tears there was a glimmer of iron determination, of a mother who would not give up. At the height of despair and exhaustion, Laura clung to every thread of hope, seeking a light for Luna's suffering, even if it was a faint and illusory light. The first light came from a holistic therapist, Dr. Maya, who promised an energy cleansing for autistic children. "Luna needs her chakras aligned, Laura. With crystal therapy sessions and detox diets, her energy will flow and her autism will be alleviated," she said in a soft voice, with a sparkle in her eyes that seemed to predict miracles in a manipulative tone. Laura, desperate for any solution, spent her last savings on expensive sessions that drained her resources. Luna was subjected to herbal baths, massages with essential oils, and long hours of forced meditation, which left her agitated, panicked, and crying due to the strong smells and unexpected touches. The therapies were sensory torture disguised as wellness. The result? More anxiety for Luna, who felt invaded and misunderstood. Dr. Maya, seeing Luna's lack of progress and energy resistance, claimed that the problem was Laura's, shifting the blame. The second salvation came with the school's promise that they would intervene against the bullying, a mere game of appearances. Coordinator Clara, with an air of forced compassion and an apologetic smile, assured Laura that the problem would be dealt with rigorously and that the school was a safe environment. Laura believed her. She watched Luna from afar, on the rare occasions when she was able to visit the school, hoping to see her happier, more integrated, making friends. But what she saw was the opposite. Luna remained withdrawn, eating alone in the cafeteria, and her drawings, once full of rockets and vibrant stars, were now dominated by dark tones and lonely figures. The school's intervention was a facade. The conversations with the students were superficial, with no real impact, and the monitoring was non-existent, a sham for the parents. The biggest disappointment, however, came from the ineffectiveness of her own efforts to obtain information about the bullying and the source of Luna's suffering. Laura talked to Luna's teacher, Cynthia, hoping she would reveal something, give her a clue about what was really going on, help her understand. Cynthia, however, was evasive and indifferent. "Oh, Laura, teenagers are like that. Children can be cruel. Luna is a little different and they don't understand. It's part of life, isn't it?" The teacher, who should have been Luna's protector and guide, minimized her suffering and, worse, implied that Luna's difference was the problem, the root of all evil. The false hopes of professional and institutional help only served to sink Laura into even greater frustration, making her a helpless witness to her child's suffering. Laura knew she needed a riskier and more direct strategy to uncover the truth, a strategy that would push her to the limit. The school, a place that should have been a place of learning and safety, had become a stage for silent daily torture for Luna, and Laura, her mother, her soul in tatters, would become a spy, her mind racing in search of the naked truth. The conflict was an invisible web of cruelty and omission, woven by those responsible and the figures of authority. Teacher Cynthia, responsible for Luna's class, was the embodiment of indifference disguised as understanding. Laura watched her from afar, hidden between the lockers in the hallway during the few moments she managed to be at school without being noticed. Cynthia always came to talk to Luna, but with a tone that sounded more like veiled reproach than affection. "Luna, stop swaying. It's not the time for that. Focus." "Luna, the other children are looking at you and thinking you're strange," she would say, in a tone of voice that hurt, while the other students, led by Sophia and her friends, laughed quietly, complicit and encouraged. The class bullies, Sophia and Bia, were the voices of bullying, the visible and cruel face of persecution. They didn't act openly in front of the teacher, but the malicious whispers, the disguised shoves, the offensive notes left in Luna's backpack, the mocking laughter when she muttered her words of comfort, were constant and cruel. Laura saw Luna cower in the corner of the room, trying to protect herself from the stares and laughter, wishing she could disappear. The pain was visible in her small hunched shoulders, in her always frightened eyes, always seeking refuge. Laura's heart ached every day she couldn't get concrete answers about what was happening. Coordinator Clara, who had promised support and inclusion, avoided her, always too busy with the school's image and her own interests, which were above the well-being of the students. But the cruelty Laura sought, the truth that tormented her and robbed her of sleep, revealed itself in an unexpected and brutal way. Laura had a daring plan, a plan to infiltrate the school for good and find out what was going on, but she needed the perfect opportunity to act. That opportunity came with the school's Peace and Harmony Week, an annual event that promised lectures on inclusion and tolerance. A cruel irony. Laura, with her experience in international events and her organizational skills, volunteered to be the main organizer. It was her perfect cover. She wore plain, inconspicuous clothes and walked the halls, invisible. It was during one of these moments, as she was passing through the teacher's lounge, that she heard voices that made her freeze. It was Teacher Cynthia and Coordinator Clara. They were laughing, and the words coming out of Cynthia's mouth made her freeze, her blood running cold. "She's a lost cause, Clara. That autistic girl will never learn anything. And her parents? Her mother is always whining that she's sensitive. It's all an act. She's just putting on a show to get attention, that's all." Teacher Cynthia's laughter echoed, a cold, cruel laugh devoid of any empathy, a sound that hurt the soul. Instead of reprimanding her, Coordinator Clara sighed and said, "I know Cynthia. She's a burden on the school, a dead weight. We need to find a way to get her out of here, discreetly without any fuss. She's a problem for the institution's image, a risk to our reputation during Peace Week." The coordinator's laughter, softer but equally cruel and complicit, was the final blow. Laura felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The truth she sought, the truth that broke her heart into 1,000 pieces, was not the bullying of the students. It was the contempt, the mockery, and the exclusion coming from the educators themselves, those who were supposed to protect and guide her son. At that moment, Laura, who worked for the United Nations, UN, an organization that defends peace and human rights globally, felt a cold fury, a deep revolt. Her revenge would be to expose the hypocrisy, whatever the cost, with the authority that the whole world respected. The sound of Teacher Cynthia and Coordinator Clara's laughter echoed in the cold, empty hallway, freezing Laura's blood. There, disguised as an ordinary volunteer, her heart broken into 1,000 pieces, the truth hit her with the brutal force of a punch in the stomach. It wasn't the children who were mocking Luna in such a cruel way, but the educators themselves, the authority figures who were supposed to protect her, guide her, and educate her. The word burden, uttered by the coordinator, and the laughter about Luna's sensitivity, uttered by her teacher, broke Laura's soul, turning her pain into a silent but unshakable fury. Laura didn't make a sound. She didn't let out a cry of indignation. She put her volunteer materials aside and walked silently to Luna's classroom. She sat down at her little desk, and the tears that had been of sadness and helplessness were now of a deeper pain, mixed with a cold, controlled anger, an iron determination that would not yield. She looked at the drawing Luna had left on the table, a lone rocket flying toward a distant star, with a small figure of Luna inside, floating alone. Luna's loneliness at school, the fear in her eyes, it all made sense now. Those laughs were the poison that was corroding her daughter's soul, day after day. That night, Laura didn't vent to anyone. Her turnaround wasn't in words or immediate confrontations, but in a cold, calculated, and strategic decision. She spent hours researching, poring over laws on educational inclusion, the rights of students with special needs, and professional codes of ethics that the teachers seemed to ignore. She didn't just want the two of them to be punished. She wanted to expose the naked truth, to show everyone the hypocrisy behind the facade of education at that school, the rot that hid beneath the veneer. Laura, who had worked on human rights projects in war and humanitarian crisis contexts, knew how silence, disrespect, and prejudice could destroy lives and souls, and she would not allow that to happen to her daughter. The next day, Peace and Harmony Week, was in full swing. Coordinator Clara was on stage in the auditorium, giving a speech with a forced smile about tolerance, inclusion, and love for one's neighbor, a cruel irony. Suddenly, Coordinator Clara's eyes widened. A tall figure with impeccable posture and a serious expression entered the room, accompanied by representatives of the school board and a security officer from the institution. It was Laura, but not the discreet volunteer they knew. She was wearing an impeccable dark gray pantsuit, and on her chest, a blue and gold United Nations UN badge sparkled with her name and title, Human Rights and Education Specialist. Laura walked with steady steps to the stage. Coordinator Clara and Teacher Cynthia, sitting in the front row, turned pale. Laura's revenge would not be for retaliation, but for justice, for a son who deserved to be respected, and for a system that needed to be exposed with the authority that the whole world respected. The silence in the auditorium was so thick you could hear your own heart beating. Coordinator Clara, her face pale, and her eyes wide, and teacher Cynthia, her smile frozen, watched Laura take the stage. The UN badge gleamed on her chest, a symbol of authority they would never have expected from a volunteer. The first victory was the public and irrefutable exposure. Laura took the microphone. Her voice, once choked with pain, was now clear and firm, filled with the dignity of someone seeking the truth. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura. I am here today not as a volunteer, but as a mother, and as a representative of an organization that defends human rights and inclusion on a global level. She paused, her gaze fixed on Coordinator Clara and Professor Cynthia. I would like to share some conversations that I have had the privilege of overhearing in recent days. Laura turned on a small hidden recorder, and the room was filled with the sound of Professor Cynthia's laughter, calling Luna crazy and a burden, followed by the knowing laughter of Coordinator Clara, and her voice talking about getting Luna out of the school to save the institution's image. The sound of their cruel voices echoed through the auditorium, causing widespread shock. Cynthia and Clara's faces contorted in horror and shame. Then came the wave of outrage and support. Parents in the audience began to murmur. Some stood up, shocked by the cruelty. The school's week of peace and harmony collapsed in hypocrisy. Laura presented additional evidence of negligence and other cases of bullying she had documented. The school board present watched everything with seriousness. The biggest victory, however, was the immediate transformation in the school and in Luna's life. Coordinator Clara and teacher Cynthia were suspended on the same day, awaiting disciplinary proceedings. The school, shaken by the scandal and pressure from an international authority, promised a thorough restructuring, with intensive training programs on inclusion and neurodiversity for all staff. Luna, who was in the school's art studio, was welcomed by her mother, who hugged her with the strength of someone who had won a war. Luna's small victories were not just about her daughter. They were about restoring the dignity of all children silenced by prejudice and hypocrisy. Laura's speech in the school auditorium, the revelation of her UN badge, and the recordings of the educators' voices were an emotional earthquake that shook the institution's structures of prejudice and hypocrisy. For Coordinator Clara and teacher Cynthia, the humiliation was public and irreparable, exposing the raw truth of their cruelty and negligence. They were forced to confront not only justice, but the grotesque image of themselves that they had built, an image that was now crumbling before everyone. The power they wielded over students and mothers like Laura crumbled, revealing the fragility of their authority based on prejudice and judgment. For Laura, the turnaround was a mixture of deep relief and lingering pain. She did not feel the bitter taste of revenge, but the sadness and indignation of seeing how much her son had suffered at the hands of those who should have protected him, who should have been his guides. The mask of the ordinary volunteer fell, revealing the unshakable strength of a mother and the authority of a human rights defender. She realized that the real fight was not only against the bullying of the students, but against institutionalized indifference, contempt, and exclusion, which came from the top. Her act was not only for Luna, but for all the different children who suffer in silence, invisible to those who should care for them. For Luna, reflection would be gradual and a healing process. The fear in her eyes would diminish, replaced by a growing sense of security and belonging. The school, once a hostile and threatening environment, would begin to transform into a place where she could finally be understood, accepted, and flourish. The truth that no one wanted to tell was that prejudice can come from where you least expect it, from within the institutions that promise to educate. But it was also the truth that a mother's love, no matter how much it needs to disguise itself and fight in secret, has the power to expose hypocrisy and transform people's hearts, paving the way for acceptance and a more just future. Laura's story was not about what she found, but about what she did with what she found. A silent and powerful revolution in the name of her daughter, an act of pure and unconditional love. Life at school would never be the same, and the transformation, though not immediate, was profound and systemic. Teacher Cynthia and Coordinator Clara were removed from their positions and held legally accountable for their conduct. The repercussions of the case, amplified by the participation of a UN representative, forced the institution to undergo a rigorous and public self-assessment, implementing mandatory and intensive training programs for all employees on inclusion neurodiversity, and combating bullying in all its forms. The school, once a reflection of prejudice, began a painful but necessary journey of redemption and transformation. Laura, the mother who disguised herself to uncover the truth, emerged as a powerful and respected voice in the community, and her story gained international attention. She was no longer just Luna's mom, but a tireless advocate for the rights of autistic children and other neurodiversities, sharing her story so that other families would not suffer as she had. Her act of love and courage exposed an uncomfortable but vital truth: that prejudice lurks where least expected, and that moral authority can come from anywhere. Luna, with time and the support of a renewed school environment, began to flourish. The fear in her eyes diminished dramatically, and her innate curiosity and passion for rockets and stars shone through once again. She continued at her own pace, with her particular interests and her unique way of seeing the world, but now she was understood and accepted by everyone. Her talking to herself was no longer a source of ridicule, but seen as part of her rich and complex internal language. The volunteer was not just a disguise, but the unwavering courage of a mother who, by publicly humiliating herself, brought light to a dark place, exposing cruelty so that justice could prevail. Her story is a poignant reminder that a mother's love knows no bounds, and that, to protect a autistic child, a mother is capable of breaking her own heart to expose the most painful truth, ensuring that the light of justice prevails. Not all truth comes to light with screams or words. Sometimes it is revealed by the watchful eye of a mother in disguise, by sounds captured in secret, or by the gleam of a badge that represents global justice. Because the greatest courage is not in facing imaginary monsters, but in unmasking the silent cruelty that hides behind fake smiles and positions of authority. If the story of Laura, the mother who uncovered the truth and transformed the school, touched your heart, if you felt the pain of misunderstanding and the overwhelming power of a mother's love, then this message is for you. Don't let this powerful story end here in your mind. Leave your comment and share your thoughts. What did this story awaken in you? What lesson do you take away for your life? Share this story with someone who needs to hear this truth, this message of hope and courage today. And if you want to continue to be inspired by stories that transform and remind us of the power of acceptance and neurodiversity, then please subscribe to our channel now and turn on the bell. Join our community to amplify these voices and build a world where every child in their uniqueness is seen, valued, and loved. Your voice, your engagement, your empathy can make a difference. Let's give voice to those who have been silenced and change the world together.